Welcome to The Code, your guide to health and human performance. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Fix from Physio Room, a performance-based rehab facility here in Denver. On this podcast, we're going to explore the key areas of your life that impact your overall health and wellness, from sleep hygiene and stress management to nutrition, movement, relationships, and more. We bring you conversations with industry experts and top performers to share strategies they have for cracking the code on health and human performance. Now let's get to today's show. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this episode of The Code, your guide to health and human performance. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Fix with Physio Room, and today I'm excited to dive into this episode about functional footwear and Vivo Barefoot. We're joined by Asher Clark. He's the co-founder and design director at Vivo Barefoot, all the way from Europe, talking to us on the show today. So Asher, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time jumping on this podcast.
Absolute pleasure, and really happy to be here and looking forward to talking about human health from the ground up.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's everything starts with a good foundation. Asher, will you give us a little bit of a background on how'd you get involved with Vivo Barefoot? Like what were you doing before? What do you do now at Vivo? And just sort of where'd you come from?
So look, I've always been interested in that kind of intersection, I guess, of people and planetary kind of health or performance. I'm a country boy at heart, into surfing and kind of big green and blue health nut, I guess. But also growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, been really in that kind of intersection of music and culture. What the brands of that time were doing, with your Nikes kind of, and your Nike and Michael Jordan and that, and hip hop and music, and just that kind of melting pot of brand culture performance has always interested me. And I ended up in kind of footwear, worked for lots of different brands, ultimately as a kind of designer kind of consultant, and kind of effectively kind of happened on Barefoot, but kind of in many ways it Barefoot isn't a new idea, and it definitely wasn't kind of my idea. In fact, when you pull up the kind of sheets on it, so to speak, in the 1700s, there was a Dutch physician called Petrus Camper, I think it was, who described shoes at the time, I think, of instruments of torture. There's beautiful visuals I'm sure you've seen before that shows a kind of distorted foot and a kind of an indigenous and an unshod foot. I think that was him. And then you've got Phil Hoffman, who was studying indigenous people. And I think he was describing it that, that at that time, human feet formed by nature were coarse and vulgar, I think, were the kind of the words that the people of that time thought about the foot. And, the foot is still unfashionable today, as you know, right?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, and then I mean, Vivo, the idea really wasn't ours. In fact, it was this guy called Tim Brennan, who was a childhood friend of ours. I think this was in around 2000. He was a Royal College student, and he was really into tennis. His dad was an Alexander technique teacher, and he was twisting his ankle a lot, playing tennis. And the first Vivos was basically him cutting the sole off one of his Nike Huaraches with a bread knife. To cut a really long story short, my cousin, who's the CEO of Vivo, we were kind of doing various things at the time, and we kind of came together to realize that that ultimately this is the only way to make footwear, right? And the less footwear you make, the less impact it has on the environment and on your natural biomechanics. And ultimately, this is the only way to make, sustainable footwear, is footwear that's good for human and planetary health. And that was a pretty kind of novel thing back then, and that's, you know, we stopped doing everything we were doing, unlearned a lot of what we knew about shoemaking, and started to try and apply it to making perfect footwear, perfect for feet, and then all of the education and the coaching that goes with that, because of course, you know, the foot, you know, the shoe isn't a magic shoe. All it's doing is it's replicating the barefoot condition, and I guess that's evolved into our mission today. Like, you know, all those years later, that our product mission is to make regenerative barefoot wear that is regenerative, i.e. net positive to feet, human health up the kinetic chain, and then ultimately trying to unlock the way of making footwear that is not just more sustainable, that is regenerative, and that is our mission, really.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And, you know, I think I'm going to learn a bit more about Vivo Barefoot on this interview with you. It's interesting that you said you kind of found yourself growing up at different intersections of different things, and ultimately Vivo Barefoot is at the intersection of the ground and the feet, right? It's like it's right there, right where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And that's awesome that your guys' mission is not only to create footwear that is, you know, good for humans and good for human mechanics, but also not detrimental to the planet, right? Net positive on both factors. Yeah. I think it was probably about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, that I got introduced to Vivo Barefoot and purchased my first pair, and waited for them to ship here to the United States and whatnot. But it was probably like 7 years ago that I got introduced to the idea of starting to move away from our traditional footwear, the Nikes, the Asics, the Brooks, the whatever, and purchased my first pair of minimalist shoes. And it was actually a minimalist dress shoe by a company called Lems. And then for no other reason than simply aesthetics, I moved back away from that, even though I really liked those shoes. They're nice and wide. My feet felt good. And I started to move back away from those. And then, you know, fast forward to 2 years ago, I've made that transition back again to mostly to Vivos. I think I maybe have like 5 or 6 pairs now. And that's for the most part what I wear almost every single day. So, you know, when was it that, you know, Vivo Barefoot got founded and got started? How long ago are we talking?
Well, yeah, it was effectively a kind of part of another brand back in, it was, you know, its birth was, Genesis was in 2004. And then it became a standalone brand in 2012.
Okay.
And really that was the kind of point where I think it was basically that point where you had the kind of emotional, it was a kind of a sharp edge of the knife, if you like, of the first barefoot movement, that was the kind of science, the rational tipping point, which was Dan Lieberman's study, the persistent running hypothesis, basically. We were born to run. And then of course the book, Born to Run, the emotional kind of tipping point by Chris McDougall. And then we then released our first kind of running shoe called the Evo, this running sandal called the Achilles, and then this EVA product that still exists today called the Ultra. And kind of, so there was this big moment of like product, emotional, rational. That's obviously then, that was a big time when I think New Balance had a kind of version of it, Minimus.
The Minimus
Nike
shoe, yeah.
were kind of doing free. Merrill were kind of doing a bit of it, and yeah, that was the kind of big first moment of when we kind of went for it. And I think a lot of the interesting thing about that is, a lot of when you read the book and you get emotionally inspired, you throw away your shoes and you go off running barefoot into the sunset. And but it's not just the shoe, right?
Right.
You know, depending on where you're at and how much your body kind of hardware and your foot hardware has been affected by footwear and or sitting and or lifestyle habits, your transition into standing, walking, running, moving naturally is a bigger piece than just changing your footwear.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that really kind of then was like, holy shit, this is you know, this is the only way you can make footwear. This is how we need to do it. And we need to do it with just 100% dedication, work out how to unpack it with education. And frankly, we're trying to work it out today. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
the brief is the same, and we're just continuing to try and do it better.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I love that, people do make decisions almost all the time emotionally, right? And then they justify them after the fact with logic or rationale or whatever. But I think, and maybe this is where some of your guys' education platforms and things have come from or been birthed from. But I think that's what'll happen to a lot of people. You read that book or you listen to that book and you just make this immediate transition to, I'm going to stop wearing these shoes. And like you alluded to, their body may not be ready for that like cold turkey transition. So what are some of the challenges that you guys have seen like along the way on, people transitioning from traditional footwear that's more commonplace in the world to this more minimalist functional footwear? Like, what are some of the challenges you've seen with that you've had to probably educate people on how to make this transition work well for them so that they can really get the most out of it?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, our bodies our bodies, our constructs are, hundreds of thousands of years old. We've had the same bodies, limbs, feet for hundreds of thousands of years, and so we've all got that innate kind of human technology to stand, walk, run, naturally or as nature intended or whatever. And yeah, the big challenge is your body adapts to the environment you put it in, and your feet adapt to the environment you put them in. So if you put your feet, particularly when they're young, like in your formative years, it's like 70 or 80% cartilage. If you look at an x-ray of a child's foot, it looks like you've just got these little bones that don't look like they're connected by anything. So if you put kids' feet in footwear that's not foot shaped or shoe shaped, the feet become shoe shaped, and the muscles and tendons and everything don't kind of get strong and elastic and all of those important things that they would normally have done unrestricted by shoes. Obviously that goes on into later years. And then up the kinetic chain, sitting in chairs also changes the kind of alters the kinematics. I always forget kinetics and kinematics are effectively shapes and forces, right?
Yeah.
And if
physics class, you guys.
Yeah, physics, exactly. Yeah. Here's about as basic physics, but yeah. So wherever putting your limbs in space and time, and where your feet are, and ultimately the shape of your feet has a big impact on how you run, or how you move. So yeah, the big challenge is from the ground up. It's foot education, hardware, foot shape, and the impacts of that, and how to kind of try and strengthen and get your feet closer to the kind of natural potential. Posture is also a really key one. Squatting, which ultimately is the measure of your flexibility and range of motion. It's like a really deep kind of squatted, straight back, seated position is closer, shows you that you can. So yeah, so feet, squat, standing, and then a few tips on running is kind of what you need to kind of get there. And for some reason, like as human beings, we kind of all accept that if you want to learn to play tennis, you need to learn a few moves. If you want to play pool, you need to learn a few moves. If you want to learn how to swim, then it makes sense to learn swimming. But kind of tweaking and learning how to stand, walk, and then run is pretty new to us, and that's one of the things that we're kind of working on.
Yeah, which is so interesting. You're totally right that, if you want to play basketball or football, soccer, any type of sport, most people would agree you got to practice those things to get good at them. But we just have this feeling that we should be able to walk and to squat and to run naturally without having to practice those things. And that's just not the way that it works. And as a physical therapist, a physio, I understand that. Some of the best moving individuals we see are the youngest ones, right? They're like the infants who can squat perfectly. They can walk, they can run, they run with like really good mechanics. And then the lifestyle or the environment, like you alluded to, that we put ourselves in is going to impact how we change and how we develop. Now you sort of started to go down this rabbit hole of, our bodies and our feet adapt to the environment that we put them in. And if we put our foot or our shaped foot inside of a shoe that's not shaped the same way, over time, the foot is going to morph to look more like the shape of that shoe. So what are, for people that maybe aren't already wearing these types of shoes and this type of footwear, what are some of the really common, issues or dysfunctions in terms of the way the foot adapts that we see when people just over their lifetime wear traditional footwear, not minimalist functional footwear?
Really good question. I mean, there's a whole handful, but I guess the kind of the most visual one that people will be aware of is what you might call Morton's toe or hammer toe or whatever, is when your big toe starts to kind of invert, kind of put your point outwards towards your little toe, and then your second met head or your second toe drops down to allow that big toe adaptation. And and some people call and in extreme cases, more often than not with women, because they wear even more extreme, or some of them wear more extreme shaped shoes. They look like you can call them bunions as well. And what that does is that your big toe is your kind of key anchor and pivot point. It's kind of 7 times as dense the bone is the rest of the bones in your foot. And it's just a really important anchor and pivot point. And so having your big toes kind of out is your key kind of axis and where you move. And alternatively, if those big toes point inwards, it starts to change your gait. So rather than coming in heel strike off the ball of your foot and then off of your big toe in walking and or running, you start to roll then off the ball of your foot because your big toes are weak, out of the game. And that obviously changes the biomechanics up the connect chain and puts various forces and tweaks on ankles, knees, etc. I guess other things would be potentially like maybe the next one might be that we're all quite obsessed in the West with high arches and or arch support, with orthotics and or in shoes, but a strong healthy arch is ultimately the key kind of the spring and or shock absorption, the fascia in the arch of your foot. So an arch needs to load when the foot is landed and underweight, and it needs to unload like a spring, literally putting a kind of spring in your step. So almost flatten when it lands, and then recoil when it doesn't, and that is linked to your Achilles tendon and up your calf muscle all the way up through your back, springs, muscles, causing your big kind of your spring or whatever. So if you've got weak arch muscles and fascia as a result of supporting them so they can't move, then ultimately that's a key area of your feet that get weak. And a common, again, visual that you might see if you look from the back of an individual's feet is when you start to lose the strength, and then your ankles roll inwards, the balls of your feet have rolled inwards because of your big toes, and again you then start to get pretty serious issues up through the body, and and ultimately, like, as human beings, like there's a saying that movement is medicine, and once you stop moving, you're effectively dying, right? It's almost like the worst thing, being sedentary is worse than smoking, drinking, taking drugs. Moving is everything, right? So if broadly you sign up to the idea that your foundation of movement is effectively your feet. If you're damaging your feet, then ultimately you're affecting your ability to move. If you're affecting your ability to move, then you got serious problems.
I love that. That little discussion you just went on basically summarizes this whole episode right there. We're barely getting started. Yeah, and I think those two things that you went through, kind of, the pushing over or the drifting of the large toe, or the development of bunions, and then this concept of like dropping arches, or people being enamored with needing arch support, are two of the main things that we talk about on a daily basis in our office. And then the other one that maybe I think of when it comes to shoes, and this has nothing to do with the width of the shoe really, and more to do with the drop of the shoe, or how thick is the shoe from front to back, and is there a thickness difference in the heel compared to the front of the shoe, is people get shortening of their Achilles tendon, of their calf, because their foot is in a downward, slightly plantar flex position in a lot of the traditional shoes. And these are three of the most common things that come to mind for me. What I love to talk about when people talk about arch supports, and a lot of it's just misinformation out there. Like, people are told by medical professionals, by their parents, by whoever, shoe store representatives, that we need arch supports. You stand on some sensor in the store and you get told, oh, you have high arches, you need a high arch support orthotic. Is this idea of like, if any other part of our body was injured, like say you fell, you tried to plant your hand and you like sprained your wrist, and you went to the orthopedic, and he or she decided it was appropriate for you to wear a wrist brace to let that tissue heal. They wouldn't be telling you need to wear a wrist brace for the rest of your life because your wrist needs support. But that's the approach that we take commonly with arches, is you need to wear an arch support, and when those wear out, you need to get another one, or you need to get a stability shoe or something. And sometimes breaking this like narrative in people's mind is a little challenging to help them understand. Really, the way forward, the way to move forward from this, with movement being medicine, is to start to get you away from that. Like, your body will change if you introduce it to certain stressors in a good way, and we can get you out of that thing in most cases, right?
Totally, yeah. And I mean, it's if you think, if you just put your evolutionary filter on that, go back to what we were talking about before, millions of years of evolution, has done a bloody good job. And I'll tell you what, the best bit of technology to go into a shoe is effectively the human foot. We can't get close to it, right?
Right.
So the construct of big shoe, or the shoe industry that we know today, is based on the fact that your feet are weak, and you need to put loads of fancy underfoot technology to support what is fundamentally a flawed design, which is your feet, which is obviously crazy, right? So you don't need arch support, you don't need thick cushioning, because you've got springs and energy return built in, and you kind of don't need all that stuff. And to your point, it's exactly that. It's like, if something is weak or a bit damaged, the most important thing is to rehab it and get that strength back in it. But yeah, there is this kind of, I guess, mentality, and you deal with it on a daily basis of support and intervention, medical intervention, when actually, just a bit of preventative stuff, and getting the mobility back in it, getting strength back in these things is what you need to do.
Yeah, totally. I love to tell people an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of treatment. I don't like to say cure, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of treatment, or of intervention. You're absolutely right. And, you had mentioned, cushion and building the strength back in and things is, the more you continue to provide yourself and your foot with more support, more cushion, more this, more that, it just continues to perpetuate the problem. And it just keeps making it worse. And you need more of that then to feel the same way. And a lot of times, whether we're talking about running or walking, I've had this same conversation with, my family members, my parents. My mom is one of these people who she has had surgery to repair her bunion. Yeah. And then 25 years later, she had the same surgery again because that thing came right back, because the root of the issue wasn't ever really addressed. Right. And the metal that was implanted in her foot, that got changed by the footwear over time. But yeah, a lot of people will wear shoes that have large stacks of cushion, and the rationale for wearing it is that it decreases the shock or decreases the pressure on their foot. Yeah. And coincidentally, what the research would suggest is directly the opposite of that, is that our body is looking for feedback. Our body's looking for sensory connection from the ground. And the more cushion and more padding you put in between your foot and the ground, the harder we intuitively are going to strike the ground to try to get that same feedback from the floor or from the ground. So, a lot of the running research would actually suggest people with more cushioned shoes have higher impact forces. And, we'll talk to some running experts and running rehab people on this show, but, I want to make sure, in case people didn't listen to both episodes, that they hear that on this episode too. And, I'm assuming that's part of what goes into the very minimal approach of the shoes that you guys make, having like a very small amount of fabric or of cushion between the foot and the ground. Yeah.
So look, footwear does go back, tens of thousands of years, probably more than that. But footwear was invented by humans almost as a tool, right, for protection from cuts and thermal damage. But basically, that's it. And it wasn't until we started riding horses that we then put on. We then had pointed toe shapes to get in the stirrups, heels to stop our heels from going through the stirrups, and that kind of became the construct, if you like, of what was fashionable and cool.
Sure.
So obviously that kind of toe shape exists today, and then that heel-toe differential, which you were talking about, here, also exists today, but with cushioning. And one of the really interesting things that not many people think about is your feet are the ultimate movement sensors, right? They literally got exactly the same amount, or very close to the same amount of nerve endings in as your hands. Right. So your hands are made to feel, and your feet are made to feel. So it kind of stands to reason that the kind of sensory ability of your feet is intrinsically important to your proprioceptive system, and your ability to move efficiently and injury-free as an upright kind of biped. So it's effectively, movement is shapes and forces, kinetics, kinematics, and that information your brain's getting from your feet, that split-second information of where your feet are landing, is allowing your brain to put your limbs in the right place. And obviously, in the case of when you run without cushioning, it's shorter, bouncier strides, and you're head upright, as opposed to when you put cushioning under your feet, your brain is getting confused, and it's almost like walk running. It's like walking is efficient, because almost like a pendulum type movement, and because your body isn't getting that feedback from the ground, it's able to heel strike or walk run, or what we call kind of jog. So it's kind of lazy, your body kind of naturally trying to conserve energy, lazy movement. In terms of injury, it's a little bit like if you had a kind of baseball bat. Well, maybe that's a bit strong, but if you had a kind of little rolling pin and you hit yourself on the head, you'd only do it once because you're going to feel it. Right. If you had a kind of I don't know, like a kind of soft helmet on and you're hitting yourself over the head, you could do it quite a lot, but ultimately you're gonna lose brain cells, right?
Right.
So it's the same kind of concept with cushioning. You know, if you mask that important information, you run badly, and then it causes shocks up the body again, and you have long-term challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just chatting with somebody else on another episode, and we were sort of talking about that with the hands and how, say if you're a neurosurgeon, you need to have fine motor control. You want to wear like the most dexterity benefiting gloves possible so that you can move and you can feel. You're not going to wear oven mitts while you're trying to perform neurosurgery. Well, it's the same thing. If you need your feet to sense and to feel things, the more cushion and masking you put on them, the harder that's going to be, and the more they're going to have to work, and your brain's going to have to work to try to get that feedback. And a lot of times that's why we'll see things, or we'll see people in the office who maybe they're running marathons or half marathons, and they will come back after their race or after their long training with just blisters or toenails that just look absolutely crushed from their run. And they didn't even realize that was happening because of the adrenaline and the cushioning. And like, they didn't even realize it until they took their foot out of that shoe and they're like, whoa, look at what happened. That sensation is just limited. So yeah, I hope you guys, when you're hearing what Asher's talking about, like this is important. This is foundational functional movement, and it's going to affect everything that you do, whether you're standing, you're walking, you're running, it doesn't matter, squatting, it's going to affect it all. So, I'm fortunate to have found, a organization like Vivo Barefoot that, I absolutely dig the shoes. I've got a couple different styles for, casual, for workouts, for you name it. But, where do you see, Asher, like there's shoes that you guys have on your site? There's shoes for fitness, there's shoes for lifestyle, there's shoes that are a little bit more casual and dressy, all with the same goals in mind. Where do you guys see Vivo going in the future? And I would love for you to like start to touch on some of these like educational courses and platforms and things that you guys have that, man, I haven't even like gotten to experience the breadth of that stuff yet.
Sure. So yeah, in terms of the education kind of piece, we've just launched a kind of digital platform called Vivo Health, and the idea is, it's the most important product that we've never made in some ways. So it's a service, kind of not about a shoe. And ultimately a place to kind of reconnect back to your natural self and your natural potential. It's going to turn into a bigger platform that goes all the way up, through the various touch points of natural health. But of course, with us, it kind of starts with your feet, and it's effectively a hub of courses and experiences that guide you through the joy of moving again. Feet, squat, walk, and obviously, the whole thing that we say is you really got to kind of walk before you can run. So depending on where you are on that journey, you got to build up, when it is just without any kind of cushioning, or back to barefoot, the barefoot condition, as it were. This helps you go on that journey, slowly, in the right way, and do it in a joyful way without any kind of real hiccups. Right. So yeah, the content is ultimately kind of curated by a growing number of kind of health experts, not just kind of internally, and it's got cool ideas, little health hacks, and in the future it will all go up to up the connect chain, gut biome, and everything to do with reconnecting into the natural world and natural health.
Yeah,
at a bigger level. Yeah,
I love that. For people that don't know or who have never tried out a shoe from you guys, where is Vivo Barefoot based out of anyways?
We're based from the UK, so yeah, we're English cobblers, and our head office is in London. And we're about to create an office somewhere between Somerset, which is the southwest, where me and my cousin CEO were born.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we're going to move the campus, as it were, or the main campus out into nature.
Cool.
It's hard to kind of have a mission about, you know, the importance of reconnecting into the natural world and your kind of natural potential from the middle of London.
Yeah.
So
The
we're
middle of the
super
concrete.
excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, middle of the concrete jungle. And so yeah, that's where we're based. It's a very exciting time for us right now. We're just, in terms of product, we're splitting into kind of three kind of key categories: outdoor, active, and kids.
Mm-hmm.
With some, you know, now they're going to be run as almost separate kind of little entrepreneurial teams that
Sure.
really under the skin of the product, the proposition, the customer, the bespoke journeys, the experiences, the education that come with that. So we've got some some incredible people now that have joined the Vivo mission,
Mm-hmm.
doing all of that. And so there's some brilliant new product with, you know, and exciting end of life solutions and experiences on the way to kind of add to our mission and our momentum. Yes, it's a fun time.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, the passion is fueling the fire, it sounds like to me, listening to you talk. And I think the idea to move your guys as like headquarters is that's awesome, to just connect that infinitely, like right there in line with what you guys are talking about. So for somebody who has never tried a pair of Vivos, who might be listening to this, I know, you know, you're going to purchase those shoes online type of thing. And say that maybe they hop on your guys' website and they, you know, they're concerned about finding the right size shoe. And they're like, I'm not sure. I see the sizing guide, but how do I know if they're going to fit? Can you just speak to, you know, how that person's going to experience, like maybe they purchase a shoe, maybe they buy a size 10 and it gets to their home and like, oh shoot, they try it on and they just feel like it's not right. I know you guys, and all the experience I've had, customer service has been phenomenal. So how do you take care of a situation like that, so that we can encourage someone to not hesitate wanting to try out a pair of these shoes?
Sure. So, I mean, I think the first thing is, and this is part of the Vivo Health thing, the first thing is ultimately going to, there's a little why barefoot kind of button on our website, which will give you the kind of why of what's different about Vivo footwear and perhaps footwear you're used to. And really, there's no secret sauce. All we're trying to do is make as little footwear as possible, ultimately get back to the kind of barefoot condition. From there, the funnel, so to speak, is what we call a kind of assessment tool. So that basically looks at, it's a multiple choice of, you know, are you new to barefoot? Are you not? Foot shape, where you're at with your squat, what you're going to use your footwear for, and that will help kind of give you some kind of basic transition advice and also some advice into perhaps the type of footwear that would suit your needs. Then in terms of the fitting thing, so this is a really interesting one. The long answer, the long answer is making the perfect fit for feet that are ultimately all shapes and sizes is a big innovation piece that we're working on that perhaps we can talk about at the end. But what we make is the perfect, what we make is a data-driven kind of foot shape that fits the mean or the majority of shapes, so to speak. So if my advice on fitting is ultimately, if you've got a particularly wide foot, then you want to opt for a little bit more toe room, because you're ultimately putting something bigger in the shoe, as it were. And if you've got a slightly slimmer foot, then you perhaps go for a little bit less toe room, because the fitting will be slightly different. And all of those instructions are on the website. And again, we're constantly working to make that as friction free and as simple as possible. So that's in the size guide, all those videos and how to's. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And I found that size guiding and whatnot. I've even seen some of the changes that you're mentioning over the last couple of years as I've purchased a couple different pairs of shoes. The experience is a little bit different, helps to dial that experience in to each individual. So I found it extremely helpful. And from listening to you talk, about why wear barefoot shoes, you've got me convinced to keep doing this. And as I wear one pair out, just get another pair and not go backwards in my transition to this functional type of footwear. So yeah, I would love to hear you expand just a little bit more on, what you mentioned, Vivo Health, and the natural health evolution and the platform you guys are creating. But like, what else is next for Vivo Barefoot, and where do you see your guys organization going in the future? Like, what innovation, as you mentioned, is coming?
Yeah, I mean, your listeners are probably going to hear this first, but effectively, we're on a mission to make perfect footwear, perfect for feet, and ultimately perfect for the planet. And the real kind of challenge to do that is number one is the shoes are made in we are made in the best, but ultimately oversee quite complex supply chains. So shoes are inherently complex with multiple layers of parts and pieces that come together, made on the other side of the world. A lot of them. We make shoes in Asia. We've got a really cool kind of social factory in Ethiopia, and we'll make shoes in Portugal as well. The other thing too is millions of shoes are produced each year. Actually 20 billion shoes are produced each year, and they tend not to have end of life solutions, so they effectively it's a big landfill problem. And then finally, we talked about fit earlier. And the problem is that in general shoes don't fit, right, because feet are all different shapes and sizes. So our big innovation piece is effectively trying to use technology to create a localized digital value chain to go from scanning your feet to made to measure footwear delivered to you as a delivered straight to you. So it's kind of it's ordering you rather than mass ordering, and ultimately with end of life solutions. So it's perfect footwear, perfect for feet, with an end of life solution and a really small footprint, only making what you need to make perfect for the individual is the thing that we will be launching in September this year. So we're very excited by that.
That is awesome. And I can't wait to see that transition happen, because, with so many other things in life, when people, order things or, whether that's food or whether that's clothing or whatever, like we all want things that are like fit us perfectly and that are unique to us, or they're the recipe that we like. And yeah, I think everybody listening to this probably has had that experience where you go into the shoe store and you try on box after box after box of shoes, because what you're putting on just doesn't feel right and just doesn't feel comfortable. And then you're left with like, you just pick the best one of the options, where none of them really felt like the ideal one, but it was just the best of the choices that you had. I know I've experienced that. So no, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so that's the kind of holy grail, so to speak, or the North Star, and we're gently going to be unlocking. Well, we're unlocking it as we speak, but it will become a consumer-facing thing at the end of this year. It's not going to overtake, the way we also make our footwear now, which is, I think in the upper percentile of we're ultimately a B Corp, so we externally kind of measured on our kind of social, environmental, corporate kind of impact anyway. So we kind of hold ourselves and the way we make things and do things up, to the highest levels of transparency. And there's obviously plenty of work to do there, but
yeah, sure.
This innovation piece is is kind of spearheading that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Vivo's holding themselves to a high standard here, guys. Do the same for yourself and order a pair and try out those shoes if you haven't done so already. All right, Asher, if somebody wanted to go on and purchase a pair of shoes, as we like wind down this episode and wrap this up so you can get back to your family, where can people find you guys? What's the best way to get in touch with you guys? What's the website or whatever? Where can people find Vivo Barefoot so that they can learn more information about you guys?
Yeah, so www.vivobarefoot.com is where you ultimately find us. We're kind of we're kind of hanging around on Mark Zuckerberg's channels and Instagram, and you can find us on YouTube for plenty of tricks and tips and unboxings from various people that are trying us out too. We got retail in various parts of the world, but yeah, if you come to vivo.com, if you want to visit us physically, you can see what our retail kind of map looks like. I hope if you do have the experience, I hope you have a good experience. We're really not putting any secret sauce into anything we're doing. All we're trying to do is get as close to barefoot as possible whilst delivering the function, be it outdoor, trail, climbing, walking, running, movement every day we can. We've got a long way to go, but we're excited to still be on the same journey. And listen, Andrew, thank you for this 50 minutes to chat about everything Vivo and natural health and foot health and all of that. And really appreciate the opportunity to share this with your listeners.
Absolutely. Well, like we sort of talked about, you guys, sitting is bad for you. Footwear that negatively changes the dynamics of your foot, that's not good for you either. So Asher and I are both going to get up out of these chairs. I'm going to go put my Vivos on and get myself outside. Asher, thanks again for being on here. Visit Vivo Barefoot online, check out their shoes, check out their stuff. And share your experience. Find them on social media. Let me know how you like them. If this is how you found out about them. But again, thank you for being on here and tuning in to this episode of The Code and listening about Vivo Barefoot. We'll catch you guys next time. Thank you so much.